The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki unleashed an explosion equivalent to 15 kilotons of TNT, resulting in a highly radioactive blast. The scale of this event is evident from the 400 times more gases spread into the atmosphere compared to typical accidents. Today, the massive dome, standing at 354 feet high and 840 feet wide, serves as a poignant reminder of this catastrophic event. This dome, erected to conceal the scars of history, bears witness to the profound impact of human conflict. It not only marked the end of World War II, but also sent shockwaves across the globe, stirring fear in America's biggest enemy, the Soviet Union. In contrast, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, known for its devastating consequences, was caused by a surprisingly small mistake, releasing a staggering 225 tons of radioactive material into the environment. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, located about 100 kilometers from Kiev, stands as a reminder of both progress and tragedy. Back in the Soviet era, during the height of the Cold War, nuclear energy was a big deal. Many nations, including the Soviet Union, were jumping on the nuclear power bandwagon. Chernobyl was one of those plants, and it was a big deal at the time. It had 4 reactors, each capable of producing a whopping 1,000 megawatts of electricity. That's a lot of power. But it was reactor number 4 that made history, and not in a good way. You see, reactor number 4 was the last one built, and it's the one that went boom. Today, there's this huge dome-like structure covering it up, a constant reminder of the disaster that happened there. So, how do these reactors work? Well, it's all about nuclear reactions heating up water to create steam, which then spins turbines to generate electricity. Nuclear reactions are like a chain reaction. Once they start, they can't be easily stopped. That's why control rods are essential in every reactor. They're made of a material that can absorb neutrons, which are what trigger uranium atoms to split and release energy. Now, these neutrons are crucial for nuclear reactions to occur. But if they get absorbed by the control rods, it slows down the reaction. It's like putting the brakes on a speeding car. In Chernobyl's case, these control rods were made of boron carbide with graphite tips. This setup helped regulate the reaction inside the reactor. But despite these safety measures, accidents can still happen. Inside a reactor, temperatures can soar to a blistering 1,600 degrees Celsius, similar to the sun's surface. That's why it's vital to keep things under control. Keeping the reactor cool was a crucial matter. Inside, water constantly circulated through pipes using pumps, just like a car's refrigeration system. But Chernobyl's reactors were a unique design, not a typical configuration. In a car, when you turn off the engine, the water stops flowing. But in a nuclear reactor, even a momentary pause in water circulation is a big no-no. Why? Because even after the reaction stops, the reactor continues to produce heat for a long time. So, to prevent overheating, these water pumps had to run 24/7. Now, you might be wondering, where did all this electricity to power these bombs come from? Well, normally the turbines generated the necessary juice. But just in case of a power outage, the diesel generators were on standby. Switching to these generators meant that the water pumps would be off for a full 60 seconds. Engineers were keen to ensure that even during those critical 60 seconds, the water pumps kept humming along. So they came up with a safety system. Here's how it worked. When the reactor was shut down, electricity production wouldn't come to an abrupt halt. Instead, it would gradually decrease from its full 1,000 megawatts capacity. During this gradual reduction, about 60% of the pumps could still be powered by the remaining electricity, keeping things ticking for those crucial seconds. After the 60 seconds elapsed, the backup generators would kick in, following the same protocol. While the system was in place, testing was still pending. But before that could happen, a safety test was scheduled for the evening of April 25, 1986, on Reactor 4. The task fell to Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, who had overseen similar tests on reactors 1, 2, and 3. However, history tells us that this particular test didn't go as planned. How could the Deputy Chief Engineer, set to perform the test that night, have known what lay ahead? According to protocol, the safety test was supposed to be conducted when the reactor's power output was at 700 megawatts. However, Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, who typically ran the reactor at its maximum capacity of 1,000 megawatts, decided to slow it down for the test. He ordered the insertion of control rods to gradually reduce the nuclear reaction. So far, everything seemed to be proceeding as planned. However, it appears that too many control rods were inserted, causing the reactor's power to plummet from 1,000 MW to just 30 megawatts. When some of the control rods were withdrawn to increase the power, it shot up to 200 megawatts. Further adjustments led to a total of 211 control rods being withdrawn, well beyond the limit stipulated in the rulebook, which allowed for only 8 control rods to be withdrawn at a time. According to the rulebook, there should have been at least 15 control rods inside the reactor at all times. However, this violation led to a chain reaction where the power rapidly escalated from 200 megawatts, surpassing even 1,000 megawatts and reaching several thousand. This immense heat caused the water in the pipes to evaporate quickly. As a result, the reactor core, which was meant to cool down, began to overheat. Panic ensued in the control room as the reactor started vibrating uncontrollably. The only solution was to initiate an emergency shutdown by pressing the emergency shut-off button. The engineers acted swiftly and pressed the button, but as soon as the control rods were inserted back into the reactor, there was a loud bang. The explosion occurred in Seijo village and was equivalent to a 225-ton TNT blast. To put this into perspective, it released 400 times more dangerous gases into the atmosphere compared to the nuclear bomb Little Boy dropped on Hiroshima. This tragic event took place on April 26, 1986, at 1 o'clock in the night. Questions arose about why the control rods meant to slow down the reaction ended up increasing it instead. The control rods were made of boron carbide, but their tips were made of graphite. While boron carbide can stop the reaction, graphite can actually increase it in emergency situations. The explosion was caused by the graphite at the tips of the control rods exceeding their limits. When the emergency shut-off button was pressed, the graphite's release accelerated the reaction beyond control. This led to the reactor reaching its tolerance level and ultimately resulted in the explosion, tragically claiming the lives of 2 engineers on the spot. 2 people were severely burned due to the blast, and a fire broke out in the plant's reactor. Initially, it was thought to be a regular fire, as no one realized the extent of the explosion's impact. However, radioactive material began spreading in the atmosphere at an alarming rate. Firefighters rushed to the scene and attempted to douse the flames with water. Unfortunately, the fire was not ordinary, it was a graphite fire, which proved challenging to extinguish. In response to the emergency, the entire nearby city was evacuated overnight. Around 50,000 people lived there at the time. Over 100 buses were quickly organized to transport the residents to the neighboring city of Slu. They were accommodated there for the next 10 days under the care of the authorities. Helicopters worked tirelessly to extinguish the fire, aided by over 5,000 tons of sand and soil, along with other materials that helped control the blaze. After 10 days of intense effort, the fire was finally brought under control. However, in the following days and months, continuous emissions of radioactive gases persisted in the atmosphere, affecting the health of firefighters and causing illness and even death among some individuals. The Soviet Union initially attempted to suppress news of the incident, fearing its repercussions during the Cold War era. However, their efforts were short-lived. Just 36 hours after the blast, on April 28, Swedish radiation monitoring stations detected increased levels of radiation in the air originating from Ukraine. This forced the Soviet government to acknowledge the incident and address it on the world stage. Even after the fire in Reactor 4 was put out, the danger was far from over. There was a pool of water beneath the reactor filled with radioactive material in large quantities. If not emptied in time, the steam from this water would release radioactive gases into the air, posing a serious threat. Evacuating the water meant risking lives by going into the pool and opening the drain valve. It was a perilous task that no one was willing to undertake. However, 3 courageous individuals stepped forward: mechanical engineer Alexei Ananchenko, senior engineer Larry Bespalov, and shift supervisor Boris Baranov. They selflessly volunteered to enter the pool, knowing the grave risks involved. In a daring mission, these 3 heroes descended into the dark waters, facing the danger head-on. With bravery and determination, they opened the drain valve and successfully emptied the water. The draining of the water marked the end of a perilous mission for many. Dubbed the suicide mission, all 3 individuals miraculously emerged unharmed. However, the damage was already extensive. The aftermath of the blast unleashed a deadly cocktail of chemicals, including iodine-131, into the atmosphere. Thousands developed thyroid cancer, and many lost their lives, particularly among the brave firefighters and cleanup crews who risked their lives at Chernobyl. These toxic substances wreaked havoc across Europe, staining forests from green to red and contaminating the land. As rain fell, it carried these chemicals, spreading them into the grasslands and affecting the animals that grazed there. In the immediate aftermath, only 31 deaths were reported in the first 4 months. However, the long-term effects of radiation exposure took a heavy toll, claiming the lives of nearly 4,000 people over the years. The exact number of deaths resulting from the Chernobyl disaster remains uncertain and is difficult to estimate. Access to the site of the nuclear accident is restricted to the general public, underscoring the ongoing hazards posed by radiation. Even years later, radiation continues to emanate from the area, with projections suggesting it will persist for the next 400 years. In an effort to contain the spread of radiation, the government erected a massive dome over the site at a cost of approximately $3 billion. This monumental structure aims to confine the radioactive materials and prevent further contamination of the atmosphere. Over the next 100 years, the dome is expected to mitigate the release of radiation from the Chernobyl disaster, offering a measure of protection against its lingering effects. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Your support means a lot to us. If you like the content, subscribe, like, and share the video. Your feedback is valuable to us, so don't forget to leave a comment below. See you next time for more interesting content.